Welcome back to the 99, where we're focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I'm your host, Patrick Marlett, and this is our 2020 year-end roundup. That's right, the year of Commander has sadly come to a close, and I thought it would be best to provide you all with the must-own cards from this year. The top two in each color, multicolor, colorless, land-based, and of course, legendaries, what we thought were the best legendaries from this year. And let me preface on that note that these are not solely my opinions. This is a collection of opinions from the Brew crew. That is to say, the players you see on this program. So everyone from Ernesto to Rebel, Justin and Alex, anyone you've seen in the past and the present with our Brew Wars, voted on these cards. So they're not solely my picks from this year. Do bear that in mind, because some of these I don't agree with, but some of these I certainly agree with. Now, before we jump into this episode, I want you all to know that if you enjoy the content provided here, the best way to help support it is via Patreon. And our Brew babies know, and our Brew crew members know, there are a lot of perks that come along with that. If you want to read through the whole list, you can do so via the link in the description. But to let you all know, whether you donate $1 or pledge $5, you get to play pickup games with myself and the crew over on Discord. That is voice on Discord, as well as games on Cockroaches and webcam with some of the crew. And I try to set those up regularly. Moving into 2021, I'm going to have a set schedule for that. But if you want to play games with myself or the crew and see list before I ever have them touch the show, that is the best way to do so. Also note that you get to take part in our monthly topics, that is our Brew crew members specifically. And for the month of December, our monthly topic is what got you in Commander and what was your first deck. I wanted to give us all something fun to reminisce on for the month of December, so feel free to discuss those first lists in the comment section down below. And if you still have a link to that first list, share that too. Lastly, the best way to support the channel indirectly is with a purchase of any of our swag items. That's right, there is merchandise now for the channel. And if you wanted to rep 99 apparel, now you can do so. Or through the affiliate link in the description. That's right, if you purchase your next pack, singles or more, through TCG Player, a small portion of those proceeds will go to help the channel. It costs you nothing extra, and you're doing us a solid. So thank you so much for using that link when you pick up all these essentials. And on that note, let's jump into the collection of cards we discussed, starting with white. So we have, this is fairly obvious, I feel. White didn't get too much this year, but it got a couple of hate bearers that were pretty good. And the top of the ranks are Arcana of Maria and Dranth Magistrate. And I'll start with Arcana of Maria first. Arcana is 2 generic, 1 white for a creature Archon, 2/3 body. Flying, each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. That is a lot of text. Now, unfortunately, the rule of law effect applies to you and opposing players, right? That only seems fair for a 3 CMC creature at 2 generic and 1 white, but do bear that in mind. However, the Root Maze effect. Now, Root Maze is specifically artifacts and lands. If you don't know what that card is, it's 1 green enchantment, and it makes it so that everyone's artifacts and lands come into play tapped. So this is essentially that, but just your opponents. Now, mind you, in cEDH, and I should preface the rest of this video by saying this is a cEDH channel, non-basic lands are a majority of what you'll see in your opposing land bases. There's, generally speaking, unless it's a monocolored list, going to be 7 and less basic lands. I would say 7 or less basic lands in a majority of list, and oftentimes usually 2 to 3 basics at most. So you're really stunting their land base by doing this, specifically any fetch lands they might have, and or any sort of color fixing lands they might need to manipulate to better their turn, right? So anything like your Twilight Mires, stuff like that. Gravern Cairns, you know what I mean, the filter lands. This is really good at stunting all of those packages, and it comes in at, again, 2 generic and 1 white, so it's extremely castable on top of that. It's also a body that flies, so it has decent evasion if you happen to be running this in a Boros draw list. All of the recent Voltron commanders that like it when you equip things and or enchant things with auras, this is a great way to get draw from those commanders while also staxing out the board. Easily my favorite of the hate bears this year, although I do think that this next one is just a smidge better, Dranth Magistrate. At a generic and a white, creature human wizard, 1/3 body. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So there's some pretty cute things that you can do with this. You can run this with Ubamask. You can run this with effects that make it so they're having to cast spells from outside of their hand, and then obviously your opponents can't do that. But Dranth Magistrate by itself is really good for Commander because all of our commanders exist in a zone outside of our hands, right? So unless we use Commander Beacon to put it in our hands, I think that's what it's called, the Commander Beacon does that, you're going to stunt your opponents from playing out their legendaries. So if you have the Rograk, play the Rograk. Don't wait for a Dranth Magistrate to hit. This is really great at stifling strategies that rely on the legendaries to execute on the game plan. Like a Gitrog obviously needs Gitrog down. Dranth Magistrate really mucks up that strategy. Tashar really needs to be on the field for that whole game plan to work. And if you haven't seen Tashar in action, feel free to watch our previous Brew Wars episode. You know how important Tashar is to the Tashar list. There's plenty of decks that manipulate their legendaries as a major part of their game plan, and Dranth shuts all of that down. Clearly, there's more here than just that. If you use something like Jessica's Will, which is one of the cards we'll be talking about today, this really mucks that up too, because Jessica says you may play them this turn. So something like Jessica's Will, you're going to be casting it from exile. Well, you can't. You can't, right? So clearly, you don't just want to play into this with effects that allow you to cast things from exile, which are a lot of red cards these days. Some newer red cards that are allowing you to do that. Think about Dranth. Think about Dranth. Play around Dranth. Ideally, kill Dranth if it's stunting you. And if you're playing a list that doesn't really care about your commanders and is just using it for the colors, then, you know, who gives a shit about Dranth? However, those are the top two white cards from this year. Are they excellent value for you? Not necessarily. And unfortunately for the year 2020, white didn't get much that is beneficial for the player themselves. Having more hate bears is great. We've got a ton of those. We've got a lot of silence effects. We've got plenty of those types of utilities. However, we don't have much by way of tutoring, much by way of drawing, and white is easily the most stunted from this year, so far as the color pie is concerned. However, that is a topic for a different time. Now, moving on to blue. So far as blue is concerned, there are two real standouts. One came at the beginning of the year, one came at the end of the year. The first one we're going to discuss is Thassa's Oracle. I don't know if I need to read this off, but I will anyways. For blue, creature, merfolk, wizard, 1/3 body. When Thassa's Oracle enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library. When where X is your devotion to blue. So if it's just Thassa's, it's 2. You get X is equal to 2. Put up to one of them on the top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then if bleh, it's not like, oh, do I get to draw it? What do I get to do with the remainder of this text? If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. Well, instead of making this a balanced card, they decide to just shit on the entire game and make it a broken card, right? So it's not very often we see broken cards, and I wonder if in testing they did or did not realize this, but it's a good card. And as a matter of fact, it's really shaped the format. Most decks rely on Thassa's Oracle for a win. Basically, any self-mill strategy can rely on this to win the game. One of the big ones you see commonly now is Brain Freeze, Underworld Breach with LED or some form of, way to make mana. But on top of that, there is an A-B combo with Demonic Consultation. If you haven't heard of any of this, newsflash, it's what cEDH is all about right now. At least the top tier lists that are trying to ad nauseam win or do something stupid. There's clearly a ton of ways to accomplish this, but that A-B combo I just referred to is 1 black for Demonic Consultation and 2 blue for her. So it's very simple and very easy to eke out a win with that combo because it's not really that demanding CMC-wise. Converted mana cost. Is this card good? Yeah, it reshaped the format. It's really good. If you're still on Laboratory Maniac, I pity you. Why are you using that? These cards are, I wouldn't say pennies, but they were for a long time $5 and under, and now they're roughly $6 to $8 at most. Thassa's Oracle is amazing. If you don't want to play with a card that says win the game, that's up to you. If you don't want to play with the strategy, that's up to you. Most lists can reliably get away with this. And there's plenty of lists that use it outside of their own given colors. Say a list that's in Jund that can manipulate a Praetor's Grasp to cast this and win the game instead. You know, there's plenty of ways to use someone else's Thassa's Oracle. One loop or iteration I enjoy is an Altar of Dementia with Leonin Relic Warder and the Animate Aura, say Animate Dead in this instance. And if you don't know, there's a loop just with the Animate Dead and the Leonin Relic Warder, but you can use Altar of Dementia to mill yourself and everyone, and then use your Animate spell to reanimate Thassa's Oracle. It's pretty good. It's pretty cheesy, and you're an Orzhov winning with a blue card, so why the hell not? Clearly, there's a ton of ways to win with Thassa's Oracle. I advise you look at the cEDH database. I never use it, but I'm sure that it's littered with lists that manipulate her for a win. Enjoy that. She really required no explanation, but she was one that came at the beginning of this year, and this guy, Hull Breacher, came up from our last set, Commander Legends. That box right there. I got jack shit for my boxes, by the way. For 2 generic and 1 blue, creature, merfolk, pirate, 3/2 body, flash if an opponent would draw a card except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps. Instead, you create a treasure token. Is this card good? Yeah, it's really good. We're not going to talk about how this should have been a white card, or this could have been, this should have been, would have been. Who cares? It's a blue card. It's a very good blue card. Clearly, it plays into any list that wants mana. Any list that just wants ramp. Even if casting Hull Breacher is just to go over top your Selvala opponent's Rishkar expertise, right? You're just going to draw 6 cards. No, never mind. You're not going to draw 6 cards. I'm going to hit 6 treasures. You Wheel of Fortune, Hull Breacher. Wheel of Misfortune, Hull Breacher. Whatever draw strategy you were going to rely on, hell, I can just flash this in on top of a Tymna. Hull Breacher. I get treasures. You get nothing. From here on out, that replacement effect lasts. It's extremely good. It belongs in a lot of lists. I'm not going to say it belongs in every list, because I'm certain there are proactive lists that don't really care about using Hull Breacher, and are likely going to prioritize a Dockside Extortionist in most instances, a 2019 card, which we won't be talking about. But Hull Breacher is fantastic. Blue got a lot of gas this year. I mean, and this is ignoring Fierce Guardianship, right? That card also came out this year. Blue got a lot of gas. And I think Thassa's Oracle was really the most important card this year for a lot of cEDH lists and players, because it allowed you to emphasize a combo that's actually very easy to accomplish. And, you know, whether that be Hermit Druid, Mesmeric Orb, Basalt Monolith, or Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pack, something clearly easier to just establish, Thassa's Oracle was really groundbreaking. So, those 2 cards, must own from this year. I would say that Hull Breacher fits into more lists. Fierce Guardianship does as well. But if you're not rocking Thassa's Oracle and you ever want to accomplish that task, it's not very difficult. Try it. It's fun, I'm told. Moving on to black. We're going to start with Opposition Agent. Not necessarily my choice for this year. She's lost a little bit of steam. But for 2 generic and 1 black, creature, human, rogue, 3/2 body, flash, sounds very familiar. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. Okay, cool. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So we've talked about this card at length before. It's fantastic. In the least, it's a 3 CMC Stranglehold, right? And Stranglehold's a red card that makes it so players, your opponents rather, can't search their libraries. This is a 3 CMC version of that, but it's also a tutor on your part. It's a tutor that your opponent has to use. They're a fetch land, they're vampiric tutor, they're demonic tutor, they're Aldamri's Call. Whatever it is, it's your tutor now. And if you know what that opponent's using, if you know what that person's list consists of, right? It's a Grixis list, it's Kess. I can likely assume that part of your strategy is probably part of my strategy, and I can use Opposition Agent to steal a combo piece for myself. Or just deny you a combo piece. And that's cool too. Opposition Agent is fine. It's a really great card from this year. Of the 2 black cards that we're going to mention, I think the other one is easily better, but Opposition Agent will find itself into more list. Slower list, mid-range list, but it's a fantastic card, and one you should pick up if you haven't yet. However, the prices seem to be going down steadily. I was fortunate enough to pull one, so I don't need one anymore. However, I feel like this card's going to rest somewhere in the $10 region once the hype for Commander Legends has died down. We'll see. I'm hoping I'm right here because I don't think it needs to be 16, 20 bucks. Peer into the Abyss. Easily one of the most overlooked cards on this channel. And we all saw its value initially, but at its cost, you'd think it wouldn't be very good. However, it's very easy to crank out with the right list. Peer into the Abyss is 4 generic triple black, so 7 CMC total. Sorcery speed, target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life. Round up each time. So, very expensive, very costly. But what's nice about this is, although it does use your life as a resource, you care very little whether players are attacking you. And if you play cEDH, you know this, that if you're playing the black list, if you're playing the red list that establishes the fact that it's using Treasonous Ogre, you're likely going to be attacked. Black in particular, because of cards like Ad Nauseam and Necropotence. Well, this is another one to add to the list, but you don't really care where your life total's at. So what if they take you down to 20? Peer into the Abyss is still going to read, draw 40, round up, and then lose 10 life. That seems like a fair exchange to me. So this is not necessarily a backup plan to your Ad Nauseam, and as a matter of fact, although certain lists are tailored to work towards Ad Nauseam casting, you can generally see more cards with Peer into the Abyss than you will with Ad Nauseam, particularly if you've been taking damage that game. So this isn't necessarily a backup. They kind of rest on the same playing field. However, there are hang-ups to Peer into the Abyss. I just named one, Hull Breacher, right? You do say draw cards, not put into hand. So Ad Nauseam is better in that regard. Also, this allows you to target a player. Well, you know, any redirect. As a matter of fact, this year it brought us Deflecting Swat, which is a red staple. A red staple. I can Deflecting Swat this onto myself. Maybe I want to draw half my deck. And I can do so when you cast this at sorcery speed. Great. Start of my turn, I draw a card. I've got 47 cards to play. Sounds excellent. Peer into the Abyss, however, is phenomenal value for the lists that are trying to turbo out a win, right? Because you're just going to put half of your deck in your hand. You should be able to win at that point, right? We hope. Although it is tailor-made for lists that are looking to abuse half their deck, it's a very good card. Not in the same way you would jam a Necropotence into a list for value. You don't necessarily jam Peer into the Abyss for value, unless you know you can utilize it well. However, one of the better cards from this year from Black. And Black, on the whole, saw some decent cards, you know, and we're not even discussing Deadly Rollick today, which is fantastic, again, and the free commander spell they received. But Black itself, pretty good year for the color. This is also the year we saw Tiny Bones, so thank goodness we get finally a discard commander, someone in the command zone that benefits from all the mass discard, all the singular target discard that Black has. I love the color. Clearly I love the color, and I love that it was provided a handful of utilities this year, particularly that Hate Bear. I think Opposition Agent, pretty solid for what she does. Fortunately, I only use her in like one list, which is consequently Tiny Bones. Now moving on to Red. Red saw a lot of goodies over the last 2 years, but we're going to start with another one from Commander Legends that I find fantastic, a must own, and that is Jeska's Will. I mentioned this earlier, but it's 2 generic and 1 red, sorcery speed, choose one. It's a modal spell. However, if you control a commander, when you cast this spell, you may choose both. If you control a commander, right? So you can claim Firstborn, someone's Timna, and you control a commander. Or you cast Rograk. Likely what's going to happen. Add red for each card in target opponent's hand. And they can respond to this by casting spells, yada, yada, yada. Generally, on average, you get 4 to 6 And if you're starting with this, you're going to get 7. That happens often. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Now, unless there's a Dranth Magistrate, you're likely going to get away with this, right? So it's as if when you play that mountain, you play your Rograk, you play your Mana Crypt, your hand rather consists of 6 cards. You cast Jeska's Will, you got 5 cards. Well, now I see 3 off the top that I can play. Excellent. I've got 7 mana to work with. On top of any other fast mana I receive from this, we're in an excellent place. Just hope you don't top deck 3 lands. The worst I've personally done was top deck 2 lands. It always sucks. It always sucks. However, Jeska's Will, depending on how your list is built, you likely won't see 2 lands or even 3 lands. You'll generally get some decent value, right? On top of the ramp. And this is clearly good for lists that want all of that ramp. It's very rare you see staples more than 1 in a given color printed in a year, and red received a ton of staples. This, Deflecting Swat, and the next card we'll be discussing. However, although that one is more deck dependent than the 2 cards I've just mentioned, Jeska's Will is phenomenal. I believe it's undervalued. If you care about making spec purchases, this might even be one I recommend. I only buy the cards I need these years. I don't necessarily buy in excess for any reason. I don't feel like hoarding or stockpiling these for money. However, Jeska's Will is definitely undervalued at $2 in my opinion. So for those of you interested in MTG finance, take that advice as you will. But Jeska's Will will be seen in every red list moving forward. Mark me. The next card also came out from the same set as Thassa's Oracle, and that is Underworld Breach. Apparently banned in 2 formats already. Underworld Breach, generic and a red enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. You may cast cards from your graveyard for their escape cost. So this is a mechanic that arose from Theros Beyond Death and is nestled into this very amazing enchantment. Mind you, at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. Well, you know, you're trying to win the game when you cast this, generally speaking. However, you can simply play it for value. Now, as soon as this card was announced, I think one of the first combos people discussed were Wheel of Fortune, Lion's Eye Diamond, and this, right? So Wheel of Fortune makes you discard your hand and then draw 7. This also includes everyone else. If you happen to have Lion's Eye Diamonds, you can cast that from your graveyard, exiling 3 cards, get 3 red mana. Do this again with Underworld Breach by casting Wheel, right? So that's the 3 red there, goes into Wheel of Fortune, and you repeatedly do this. And mind you, you're drawing 7 cards, discarding 7 cards at this point, so you'll always have at least 1 in your graveyard to manipulate after the fact. Now, you can use that to storm into some sort of win. It could literally be a storm card or anything that's in your list. A lot of Grixis lists rely on the Brain Freeze combo I mentioned off the bat, going into a Thassa's Oracle, but there's clearly more you can do here. It could be something as simple as Stitcher's Supplier, Phyrexian Altar, and Underworld Breach, letting you cast the Stitcher's Supplier from your graveyard and using the mana you get from Phyrexian Altar, and that can again storm into some sort of victory. This is not as good a value card in my opinion as some of the other red cards that came out this year. However, it is a combo enabler that is seen in numerous lists, from Neheb Dreadhorde Champion to Kess and different partner variations. Underworld Breach is phenomenal value on top of the fact that it is an amazing combo enabler. Does it belong in every list? No, certainly not. However, for the majority of lists that can actually use it, it's amazing. It's banned in 2 formats. There's a reason why. It's extremely good. And again, I've barely scratched the surface of the kind of combos you can deploy with Underworld Breach, but red, by and large, I think benefited most from last year and this year. It's becoming a color that people actually care about. Getting to use Rograk as a partner, whom we'll get to later, is phenomenal now because I get to use Gamble, and then all of these other goodies that are coming out for red. Red is slowly becoming a powerhouse, and thank goodness it's getting more card quality, card advantage cards, right? I love where red's going. I think that WotC's design team, it finally clicked with them how they can better red, and I'm so happy we're seeing more cards for red. I love the color. I do hope that it gets better in 2021, along with white, particularly white. Moving on to green, this was a really bad year for green, particularly in cEDH, mind you, because the two cards we're going to talk about are extremely deck dependent. Like I mentioned, Underworld Breach is deck dependent, and it is, but it is certainly better value than both of these two cards combined, because only certain lists are going to want to use these. And Allosaurus Shepard for 1 green at a 1/1 body creature elf shaman isn't for every list, but for mono green decks, this is a boon. You use this card, you play this card, and dual colored list, if green amounts to your win con, you use this card. Why? Allosaurus Shepard can't be countered. Green spells you control can't be countered. Okay. For 4 generic, double green, until end of turn, each elf creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 and becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other creature types. So it's as if the Allosaurus Shepard is arming your army with dinosaurs to ride on. This is extremely deck dependent. Again, it's not going to belong in every list. Its value clearly doesn't reflect that, because the card when I bought it was $80 and I think it's still hovering over $70. And this was due initially to a scarcity of jumpstart boosters on the market. And still there is that hang up, as well as the fact that a lot of those boosters were just poor quality, poor print quality, a lot of issues, oddly leaving some cards demanding a higher price. But Allosaurus Shepard's rarity at Mythic and pack rarity with Allosaurus Shepard availability, because there are different themed decks in Jumpstart and only a handful of these themes have a percentage chance to get Allosaurus Shepard, you still don't see that many on the market. It's a fantastic card. You don't need it for every list, but if you run mono green, this is really the one to get from this year. And this next card, in my opinion, it doesn't really need to be on this list, and we're going to glaze over it very quickly, but the group decided that Destiny Spinner was the one to get. For 1 generic, 1 green, enchantment creature human. And I'm certain that this is only by default. We're going over 2 cards for each color. This one doesn't really deserve to be on the list, but we're going to talk about it. 2/3 body, creature, and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. Already spelling a particular type of list, right? Any food chain list is probably going to like this. Probably. Food chain, creatures that utilize food chain. Yeah, it's going to like it. However, for 3 generic and 1 green, target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's still a land. Now, if you run an enchantress list, obviously this is a good card. It also happens to be an enchantment. So this is fun with that synergy in mind. By itself, even if you're running a food chain combo, it's not an outlet. Like, your food chain mana can only go towards creatures, so you're not pumping your lands into amazing beater elementals. No, you're not doing any of that shit. Plus, you likely only have 2 enchantments at most at this point. 1 aura, the wild growth you have on that forest, and then her. She's okay, but this is really us scraping at the bottom of the barrel, sadly. I think that the MDFC is arguably better than this. However, Destiny Spinner, definitely not for every list. Definitely only going to be in a handful of lists. And in particular, cEDH, I never see it. And if it is in a list, it's the first card to get cut. Because sometimes you just want to take the action. The precautionary measure is cute, but if your list is operating quickly, then you don't have time for this shit. You just don't. And if you're playing Savala, you're playing Marwyn, rely on Allosaurus Shepard. You know, that's the card you should be jumping for. That's the one you should be tutoring for with Green Sun Zenith, not Destiny Spinner. But again, if enchantments are important to you, specifically Enchantress list, maybe some sort of, green-white, Selesnya, some Selesnya deck. I'm trying to think of I can't even think of a list that wants this, sadly. But green, that's what green got. Maybe this next card. But green really didn't really get a handful of great cards. Didn't really get any great cards this year aside from Allosaurus Shepard. And again, it's not like it's something universal. It's no Veil of Summer. Like, you're not going to want to slam Allosaurus Shepard into every list, and you certainly don't want to slam Destiny Spinner into every list. Sadly, that is really the best that green got this year, though. Now, the next one I want to talk about, speaking of Selesnya, we are moving on to multicolored cards. Now, these aren't necessarily legendaries we find to be the best. As commanders, these just happen to be multicolored cards that operate extremely well, whether they be in the command zone or in the 99. And the first one we're going to discuss is Emil the Blessed. Now, this is a green-white card, 2 generic, double white, legendary creature unicorn, 3 generic, exile another 4/4 body. Exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Not end of turn, you just do it. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay green or white. If you do, put a 1/1 counter on it if it's a unicorn. Put 2 1/1 counters on it instead. Well, I didn't personally, and mind you, this is a Jumpstart card. So, there might have been some tribal synergy in Jumpstart for you to want to, utilize Emil for. With constructed, cEDH in particular, we're really just looking at this for the utility at the top there. The 3 exile creature, bring it right back. And the big combo here is Dockside Extortionist. Provided you're able to make 4 treasures, right? Dockside Extortionist ETBs and makes treasure based off the amount of artifacts and enchantments on the battlefield. Generally a lot in cEDH, sadly. The card is extremely broken, and with Emil, you make infinite mana. This is an excellent multicolor utility. It's one that will only grow in value. Right now, it's nestled at $30+. So unless you utilize a deck that cares about manipulating the 3CMC combo effect at the top of this card's text box, I wouldn't recommend you pick up Emil. Hopefully it will get a reprint soon and it'll go down in value because the card itself is just fine. If you run some sort of unicorn tribal list in Selesnya, that's cool, but I think Emil, for the most part, at least for cEDH players, is generally regarded as a combo piece. So at 4 CMC, that's a really excellent ability to have on a creature. It's also just protection by and by, provided you don't have your Dockside out or you're able to shoot for that combo at that time. But this is something great for any Kenrith list, any list that has a legendary that has an outlet on it. Even if it was just Thrasios' ability for 4 generic, once you've manipulated Dockside for the infinite mana, and this could just be a backup for your Temur Sabertooth, your Cloudstone Curio, whatever else you're utilizing for infinite mana, this is fantastic value. So, Emil, really cool multicolored card. I think it's fine. We didn't really get that much by way of multicolor outside of the legendaries we've seen this year. And the next one we're going to discuss is a legendary creature human druid. From Ikoria, Kinnan, Ponder Prodigy, 2/2 body. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent from mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. And for 5 generic and Simic, you can look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Clearly, a lot of combo potential here. By itself, just in the 99, it's making all your non-land permanents produce 1 mana of any type that permanent could produce. It's amazing ramp for Simic, for green-blue. This is just amazing ramp. Amazing value by itself. If you happen to be using it as your commander and are utilizing that last ability, well, then you also have an outlet for all that mana, provided you're able to make infinite mana. And that's very easy to do in Simic. Kinnan Bonder Prodigy is one of the cooler value pieces we've seen this year. Specifically, if you're in Simic, this is something that you would want to play for, but not even necessarily. If it happens to be in your 99 and it's just bolstering your talismans, your arcane signet, and that dork over there, this is phenomenal because you get to make bigger plays that much sooner. And again, this is something you can very easily get out on turn 1 or turn 2, provided you have things like your Mox Ambers, your Lotus Petals, all the stuff to quickly begin casting spells, all your fast mana. Kinnan's fantastic. I've only played against a handful of Kinnan lists, and they're phenomenal. I mean, Simic is a really good slice of the color pie. It's one of the best color pairings, and green and blue are extremely strong by themselves. So obviously having a commander that abuses all of your utilities to ramp makes this list even better. So Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, our pick as one of the top 2 multicolored cards from this year. Now moving on to colorless. So there's really only one that came to everyone's mind, and a majority of the players from the show actually just voted for 1 card. However, I did encourage majority of us to at least get 2 down. So the second one's sort of a freebie, but the first one is, you guessed it, Jeweled Lotus. Yeah. 0 CMC, artifact, tap it, sacrifice Jeweled Lotus, add 3 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to cast your commander. So as it turns out, this is predominantly best for mono, dual, and some trip-colored list, particular partner pairings and or commanders that have a lot of generic in their casting cost. Is this going to be slotted into every list? Certainly not, but it is an excellent utility for a majority of all commander lists. And its price right now is steadily dropping. If you don't have one yet, you might even be able to afford to wait for more Commander Legend boxes to be opened, because more of these are getting cracked. Mind you, it is a mythic from the set, so its rarity and scarcity is real, right? Right now, they're roughly 60 to 70 bucks for a non-foil copy and or extended border, what have you. There's only a few lists that can utilize this as a combo, like Teshar. If you've seen my Teshar list, this isn't my Teshar list. It's a self-sacrificing artifact at 0 CMC. I can cast my commander infinitely, and I can use any of my sack outlets to kill an opponent now, right? Blasting Station, pick a sack outlet that sacrifices a creature. It's fantastic, but it doesn't need to be a combo card to be fantastic. Again, even if you're just using, the Boros version of Teshar, if you're using Gerard, this will fulfill your 2 generic cost and either the red or the white in that casting cost. You can get that 4 CMC commander out on turn 1. And what's beautiful about Jeweled Lotus is you can crank out a lot of 4 CMC commanders on turn 1. Naheb Dreadhorde Champion, right? Savala, 3 CMC and under. Again, provided the casting cost is a singular color, you can get any 3 CMC commander out. Your Najeela, it's very simple provided you have Jeweled Lotus in your starting hand. Mid-game, not so useful provided you already have your commander out. But again, if it's a list that relies on historics, perhaps you're playing Jorah, you can use this as a historic trigger. Is Jeweled Lotus the best colorless spell from this year? Yeah, it is. However, Lithiform Engine is pulling in the rear. At Mythic, 4 generic in its cost, legendary artifact, 2 generic, tap it, copy target activated or triggered ability you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. Pay 3, tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. Pay 4, tap it, copy target permanent spell you control. What? It's a combo machine. However, much in the same way that Allosaurus Shepard is deck dependent, so is Lithiform Engine. However, Lithiform fits into far more list. If your deck relies on a dramatic reversal line of play, as you've seen in a previous Brew Wars episode, you can manipulate Lithiform Engine to make infinite mana, and provided you have an outlet, win the game. There are a ton of combos baked into this card because it literally touches on any and every effect that exists within a list. From activated to triggered abilities, your spells from instanced sorcery, your permanents, even if you're just utilizing this for value, it's insane. This is something I've recently added to my Belby list. If you're interested in watching the Golgari Queen in action, well, then check out my cold brew on her. She's actually a list I've constructed now in paper, and Lithiform went straight into that list because we're making oodles of generic to abuse this card, and it is very good in that list. Even if it's just Lithiform for value, provided you have the mana, it's a really good card. Again, not for every list, but certainly one of the top 2 colorless spells from this year. Now, moving on to lands, and they all came from the same set, Commander Legends. We're going to discuss first our Battle Bond and or Commander lands. Finally, we completed the cycle of these multiplayer lands. They all read the same as enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. And with Commander being the most popular multiplayer format, generally played between 3 or 4 players, at least 3, you're gonna have, your spectator seating active, and you get 2 colors of the given color of the land. And spectator seating specifically is Boros, but we have all 10 of them now. So from Battle Bond to now, pick them up. They're cheap. The Commander Legends ones are $10 and under, I think. I mean, it really depends on the colors you're going for, but these are fantastic if you're on a budget and can't afford those dual lands. Obviously, this is no replacement for those dual lands because you can use a fetch land to acquire those, but these are phenomenal at any point in the game, provided you're in a dual or trip color list that is relying on a certain color to fix your deck's spell casting. These are fantastic. I own one of every color pairing because I know I'm going to need them for future lists, despite whether or not I'm playing them at the moment. I actually happen to pull a handful of these from my Commander Legends boxes, so I'm very happy about that. And the last card I want to discuss is another land from this set, and that card is War Room. Now, War Room it's unique in its effect, and it's not for every list, but it's fantastic. So it's a land, you tap it to add 1 generic, or you pay 3 generic, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity, draw a card. Now, they heard our cries. They know we like draw on Commander. Draw is powerful. I would say that draw ranks even higher than tutor in a lot of situations. Draw is such an important component of this game, and it's important that every color gets it. So when you're playing that mono white list, slam War Room. When you're playing that mono red list, slam War Room. If you're playing mono black and you want to get the most out of your Imperial Seal, slam War Room. This is not a difficult card to include in your mono colored list and is a boon particularly for those decks. I think at most you would want to add this in a dual colored list, but not really over that. Generally speaking, you can find draw elements to put within the 99 outside of your land base in a majority of trip and more colored list. However, War Room is fantastic, again, for the monocolored lists that need it. This is really great for those mid to late game strategies that have you deficient on your hand size, right? This is really great. War Room, one of my favorite cards from the set, super cheap. They're around $3. I grabbed a handful because it's one of those things that I just know I'm going to use. I play a lot of monocolored decks, and War Room is just a shoo-in. You need copies of it, and again, now's a really great time to buy them. Whether you prefer the extended or the regular version, they're both great. Or if you like Pringles, they're great. Pretty cheap. Moving on. Legendaries. The best legendaries from the year 2020. You might be shocked by our choices, or you may not be. I think the second one is really interesting, and it was actually a toss-up between it and one other legendary. But we'll get to that one last. We all agreed that Rograk, son of Roga, is tops, is the best. Legendary creature, Kobold Warrior, 0/1 body, first strike, menace, trample, partner. Strength is relative. How true is that statement? I wonder if they even knew when they were coming up with that flavor text. Because it turns out having a 0-cost commander, a 0/1 body on the field, is more relevant than you would ever imagine. It literally made Mox Amber one of the most playable cards, provided you have Rograk as a partner. And as we've already established, red is fast becoming one of the best support colors. Again, from Dockside Extortionist to Underworld Breach, there are a lot of combos relying on red cards now. And if this is how you splash it, I get something that I can use Culling the Weak on, Infernal Plunge on, my Mox Amber's turned on, as we've mentioned, my Jessica Will is enabled on turn 1. And those situations pop up more often than you think. Rograk is phenomenal. I've already built a list in Mardu with Timna and Rograk here on the channel. It is a turbo list that relies on Sire of Insanity to put everyone in a hell state, or rather hellbent state. And it's fantastic, good fun. However, gets people pretty salty, and I don't blame them. However, Rograk is used in a lot of strategies outside of transmogrify strategies. But that was the first thing I thought of initially when I saw Rograk. I was thinking this is an excellent creature to just have to polymorph, to transmogrify, to reality scramble. Easily my favorite legendary from this year, and what we found to be the best legendary from this year. Now, this next one isn't necessarily my pick, and it was a toss-up between this and Kinnan. They're actually a dead tie. However, the card that won out in the collective's opinion is Jeska, Thrice Reborn. For 2 generic and 1 red legendary planeswalker Jeska, 0 loyalty counters. Jeska Thrice Reborn enters the battlefield with a loyalty counter on it for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. For 0, choose target creature. Until your next turn, if that creature would deal combat damage to one of your opponents, it deals triple that damage to that player instead. And for -X, Jeska Thrice Reborn deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets. Now, Jeska is an interesting choice, but I think it's one of those commanders, partner commanders specifically, that's going to grow in value as time goes on. As we see more partners and obviously new lists come out that manipulate her effect. Because again, she doesn't need to be part of a partner pairing, she could just be in the 99. And provided you've manipulated your commander in such a way, say with Food Chain, it could really be any Food Chain commander, this is a really excellent outlet for that -X, because she'll come in with an infinite amount of loyalty counters. But as a partner pairing herself, I've seen plenty of Dargo and Jeska's, and of course we illustrated an Ishai and Jeska on the channel. One of her downfalls is the fact that it is hard to get the setup going quickly. So against more proactive list, you're going to have a tough time knocking them out with the 0 effect on her. Dargo, not so much. He doesn't really have that problem entering the battlefield. However, it can be difficult to get past opponents who are playing a more proactive game than you. And the consistency of mono red still isn't there. It lacks the tutors necessary to really get the ball rolling on certain game plans, specifically Jeska and Dargo's I'm gonna knock you out game plan. Mind you, Dargo is already at 7-5 as he hits the battlefield. Ishai takes a little bit more time, but Ishai gets more colors to work with. I do think that that is technically the better pairing, but currently Jeska herself is decent value. Do I think it's the best legendary from this year? No, that certainly belongs to Rograk. However, she is one that will evolve with time and one to look out for. She's also very affordable now, resting around $5 to $6, depending on which version you buy. I do think that there's a lot of potential with this one. I personally haven't brewed for Jeska, and it's something that I'm certainly interested in. I need to find a partner pairing that I feel suits her best, and we'll see what that is. I was thinking something along the lines of Tana would be fun. However, I haven't put my mind to this. Perhaps this could be a future cold brew for the channel. But that is it for all of the cards we found from 2020 to be the must-own essentials that you should be considering. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you found to be the best cards from 2020. You can elaborate on cards I discussed today or ones I didn't mention. But mind you, again, this is the opinion of our player base. This is not necessarily my own opinion. I will be working on an article for TCG Player discussing all the cards I found best from 2020. But again, I'd love to hear from you what you found best. And as I do with every video, there's a random shout out to one lucky Patreon member, and that Patreon member is Clyde Hardacre. Clyde, thank you for being such an amazing brew baby and such a huge help to the channel. You are among the best. And for the monthly topic, I'll be speaking for Brew Crew member DC. This Reddit post got me into MTG as a whole. Combined with a Yu-Gi-Oh! Emergency banning that killed my meta deck and destroyed my monetary investment into said deck. Hit him with your bow, Steve! I had a friend in a helpful LGS ease me into the format, and I'd build Zagana, Prime Speaker Sea Monster Tribal, so I could make those sweet Kraken tokens. And that is it for the 2020 year-end roundup. I hope this list guided you towards the must-own cards from this year. And again, if you want to pick those up, the best way to support this channel indirectly is via TCG Player. Again, your purchase there costs you nothing extra, but if you do use the link in the description, you'll be helping out the channel. And of course, if you want to join the Brew Crew and or Brew Baby Squad, you can do so via the Patreon link in the description. Now, before I close this out, I do have a handful of notes about the content calendar moving forward. It's my goal to have produced 2 episodes a week, every week moving forward. It is a lot to juggle for one person. However, for these first few months, come 2021, I'll be doing cold brews and other various live streams each Tuesday of every week moving forward. I think the start time is going to be roughly 2 p.m. and as I like to try to do moving forward with cold brew, there'll be 2-hour sessions. So if there's a list that you would like to see me build, perhaps we can work in a way that I can get to those lists. I get a lot of requests constantly on how to better a deck, and this is going to provide me the opportunity to do so with you all. So it's a collective brewing experience if you haven't seen any of the cold brews where we start on new legendaries and old legendaries alike to try to make them better. And I've really enjoyed the format. As a matter of fact, I've really enjoyed live streaming. So it's my goal to move forward into 2021, doing a lot more of that. So Tuesdays, and the regular scheduled episode every Sunday, and who knows what all else come 2021. But again, my name is Patrick Marlett, and happy brewing, babies.